to welcome you to the U Club. This is the Q&A portion of the reading of Growing Up Twice, Aaron Kirk Douglas. It's been advertised as his first and last book launch. Somehow I don't believe that. He mentioned to me that he can't do another book because this was the story of his life. And I don't know, I think give him a couple of years, the way you go, I think you're going to have plenty to write about again. But
okay,
no
maybe you know something I don't know, but that's fine.
I feel it.
Okay.
So, all right, so we're going to get kicked off here. I have a few notes because I had millions of questions as I read it. So I'm going to go ahead and get rolling on that. But
you're going to spitball a few?
I'm just going to wing it at you.
Okay.
See how you handle
all right,
it
let's
on
go.
the fly on your Douglas. I want to point out one quote that I thought was just beautiful. It's at a point towards the end, and you're with Rico, and you've got him some clothes or something, and you're in the closet. You said, "I spent my life in the closet, but this was the first time I felt beloved in one."
Yes.
So that was super sweet and one of those tender moments. When I started reading it, as I've heard a lot of the reviews, and a lot of people have said they couldn't put it down once they started. It's just really compelling story. So I want to start off with that bit of just heartfelt thank you for writing this. This is it's a really amazing book. So,
thank you.
As we've talked before, I had a big brother, the big brother's big sister's big brother when I was 6. It did not last for 10 years, as yours did. It was about a year long. I don't know. I didn't quit him. Maybe I did something to push him away, but it was about a year long. So.
Did it help?
I enjoyed it. We built a really killer fort in the backyard. We did construction, so it's kind of cool.
So you remember that?
I do, and to this day, building that fort was pretty awesome. So it was still a meaningful time, but you had this. I mean, you took Rico through this whole journey of life. So commend you on that. One of the things that kept coming up for me, and I was just kind of curious, you and Rico had these totally different backgrounds. I was wondering how you navigated that cultural difference as you were mentoring Rico.
Well, you mean me having Rico being from a Hispanic family?
Yeah. I mean, there's a very different. You grew up in southern
White bread,
Oregon,
Springfield,
Southern
South
Baptist.
Willamette
Yeah.
Valley, Southern Baptist. Yes.
And Rico was actually his mother was here illegally.
Yes.
So had a very different upbringing, and they lived in Rose.
Out on the east side. Yeah.
East side. Won't give any specifics, but just were there any? I mean, I can't imagine there weren't challenges and differences. How did you navigate that?
Well, mostly it was around language barriers, because of course I don't speak Spanish, and when I first met Rico, his mother, her English has gotten a lot better over the years, but when I first met her, her English was not very good. And so there were a lot of cultural barriers that way, and just understanding each other, and I had to have a lot of things translated with Rico has an older sister who could translate things for me to his mother, and that was probably the biggest handicap. Was I felt like I couldn't always explain what I wanted to say to her directly. I had to find somebody who could translate that to her. And then there is a cultural difference, I think, and I write about this a little bit in the book with relation to the way his family and some of the Hispanic culture view gay people, and so I could never be sure whether he really believed what he was saying to me, or if he was just testing out theories he had about we let these people carry on secretly, but we don't like it very much, and
Teens will do that though. They'll just try and push.
Yeah,
buttons.
so I don't know how much of that stuff that he said to me he actually believed. I feel like there was a lot of that. I remembered those are the times when I would think about when I was his age, and I would say things that I didn't mean, just to see what people said back to me, you know? And so there were a few of those times when I thought, he doesn't really think this, but he's hearing it somewhere, and so he's saying it out loud to me to see what my response is to that, and whether I think that's acceptable.
Just to test you, see.
Right.
Was there any of that kind of, when you came in, like, oh, well, this white dude, he doesn't, standoffishness, he doesn't know anything about my experience, you have nothing you can offer me. He seems like a pretty cool kid.
And I, when he was a little older, he did say that outright to me. You have no idea what it's like being a Hispanic teen with a legal immigrant mother and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, actually, I kind of do. So that's when I made a chart that
Yes. That was my next question.
It was actually sort of horrible that I did this. I had been.
Actually, there's a spreadsheet in the book.
It's a spreadsheet. I had been a paralegal for years and years, and so when I was writing this book, I made a spreadsheet of all of my emails and what I went back and forth and everything, and so I worked off a spreadsheet to write my book. But I actually handed him the spreadsheet and said, I kind of do understand what you're talking about, because gay people are discriminated in a lot of the same ways that Hispanics and illegal immigrants are. And so, yes, I do understand. And then, of course, after I gave him that, right away I felt really awful about it. And I had to call and apologize and say, I'm really sorry. No, I can't possibly understand how you feel. But I think he got the message. And
what was his reaction when because I'm reading this going, oh my God, I can just see one. Here you go. Fill the forms out in triplicate. Initialize.
No, he just, like, when I first handed it to him, he was sort of like, what? Like, I don't get this. Like, why are you handing me this spreadsheet? But then, actually, when I called him to apologize, he told me that he understood why I had done that. And yeah. So.
And remind me, that was around.
He was a little older then. He was 15 or 16, so he was old enough to sort of get it.
Kind of get where you were coming from.
Right.
I think that we've talked about too. I think the title is pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's really interesting, the idea of growing up twice and reflecting on your upbringing as you're expressing this mentoring. Throughout the book, you mention a friend a few times named Russell.
Mm-hmm.
And Russell was this longtime childhood friend who fell on some pretty hard times, did some serious prison time. And you mentioned that there's this similarity that you saw, a fear maybe between the two. Could you kind of elaborate on Russell and Rico?
Well, it was seen that Rico had that same sort of innocence that my friend Russell had as a child, and that at some point Russell made a choice to got caught up in drugs and then started committing all kinds of crimes. And when I saw Rico when he had a shoplift, then I started to really worry, and I could sort of sense that there was an opportunity for that situation to repeat itself, and I was really actually feeling fairly desperate that I not have to live through that again. And I guess that's what it means by growing up twice, is that probably many people who have children have this experience when they're raising their child, that they sort of look back on their own childhood and they think, well, this is how my parents did it, and I wouldn't do it this way, and I would be different, and yeah, I'm gonna fix it. And so I was feeling that way towards him, like this was my best friend growing up, and he ended up becoming a criminal, and I don't want to see that happen again with Rico. So that was a very big concern of mine.
Did you remain friends with Russell through that whole tough time?
Well, we lost contact for a little while, but while he was in jail, I did correspond with him every few months. And he was in jail off and on for probably 10 years for a couple of different felonies. And there is a point where I write about how I was corresponding to Russell and asking him to write a letter to Rico to try to get Rico to see what would happen if he kept on doing the same kinds of things he was doing at that time. And it was absolutely weirdly circumstantial that everything worked out the way that it did. And that was another reason why I kind of went, I think I should write a book about this, because the order in which things happen just seemed to kind of write themselves.
That letter is amazing. It's one of those really, it's a really powerful moment in the book. So Russell's letter to Rico.
Yes.
It's funny listening to your experiences with talking to Rico, and it seems like I met him a few times. He seems like a pretty reserved kid, sort of stoic, standoffish. I'm sure you have a different experience with him, but talking to kids, I always get that. Oh, your kids are so amazing. Like,
but they're so polite. They're so shy and polite.
I paid them to. But talking to kids and teens in particular is hard enough when it's someone who you've been in their life from the time they were born, and you've kind of developed that communication over time. But it seems a lot harder coming in later, especially getting into the tweens. How do you learn and then subsequently teach someone to communicate openly and expressively and express themselves? And
I didn't.
$20,000 question.
Yeah, no, I actually did not teach him that. It took a couple of years before he opened up to me very much at all. So the first couple, because he had so many adults abandon him or not be part of his life, and he had so much turmoil that it wasn't until you were actually there for a really long time and he felt like you weren't going anywhere that he started to open up. And I think that's why after about somewhere between 6 months and a year together, he asked me, would you be my big brother forever? Because he really wanted to know and to have a sense that this was some adult who was going to stay with me and not abandon me and leave me to be alone.
That, yeah, and he had just asked you outright, like put you on the spot, like, are you going to stick around?
Right.
But I think probably even more powerful than that was actually sticking around. Right? You can imagine actions speak louder than words.
Well, that's when you think, well, if my job changes, or you're thinking about reality. You have this child who you've been mentoring for a year, and they're asking you to stay forever. And that's when you're like, well, what do I say? Because I don't know what's going to happen in my own life. Maybe I can't do that. And so I kind of copped out. I thought ahead, and I thought, well, at some point in his teen years, maybe he won't like me anymore, and I wish that I weren't around anymore. So I said, I'll be your big brother as long as you want me to.
That's a good one. So,
yeah.
Because that's one of the agreements with the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, that either party can opt out if they want to at any time, right?
Right. They asked for a year commitment up front from the big, and then after that, it's up to you.
I going off out of order here, but something that was on my mind because you mentioned a few times that you're technically a volunteer. That's your job here as a Big Brother is as a volunteer, but as time goes on, how can you not help but become a family member? And so I was just curious how you made that transition, how what's going on in your head as a volunteer. It's a different level of commitment than a family member, but you definitely feel like, as I'm reading this, it's like, wow, Rico's part of your family.
I think there's a point where you decide you're so far into it that they really are sort of like, they really just become your family. And you wake up one day and you think, wow, like, they're closer to me than my real family. And that's when you kind of realize that they are your family, because you have spent so much time with them and you see them so much more than you see the family you were born into, that they become your family.
And speaking of your family, there's a few bits in there. There's a few stories, flashbacks and whatnot of some of those, your own tough teen times with your dad in particular and your mom. How did that, I mean, it seems very tumultuous, especially with you and your dad at points, or very, that father-son struggle. But then towards the end, he like really warms up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, what kind of brought that change of heart? At one point, your dad said that there's only so many ways to change your station in life. You can marry up, you can educate yourself, or
right.
One other way. And so I was wondering.
You can develop a talent, or you can go to school and get an education. Those are the 4 ways you can move up in life.
And you married up, was that part of?
Yes. That was it. He was absolutely thrilled the day I brought home a doctor. He was like, yeah, this is it. Like, come on in, spend the night. We're good. We're golden now.
Well, I was wondering if that was that. I mean, that's about the point in the story. I just wondered if that other stuff was going on.
No, that's how it happened. Yeah. He loved having a doctor in the family. That was all. He talked about his health problems from then on out.
Right, having a doctor. Right.
Oh yeah.
That was
right.
As I'm reading that, I have a gaggle of children myself, and as I'm reading your experiences as a mentor, it seems like you struggle with a lot of the same issues that we do as parents. Keeping your kids, especially your boys, but keeping your kids on the straight and narrow, away from drugs, away from gangs, not doing that machismo thing out on the streets. Do you have any tips or tricks that worked, or funny stories? There's the carrot and the stick with the internet, but
yeah, I used the internet to keep him from doing bad things. Whenever he did something I didn't like, I cut off his internet, which was like cutting off his lifeline to the outside world. He hated that. It's like, no, don't cut off my internet, I'll be good. I think children have an innate desire to want to please you and to want to make you happy. And so when you tell them that they're disappointing you, I think that has a really big effect on them. They might not admit it, but I think that it does.
That the guilt trip.
Right. Yeah, it's a guilt trip. Completely, yeah.
And you basically, I mean, you said that in those words. This really disappointed me.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you went straight for that one. Did you hear that from Mom? Or?
Yeah.
Moms agree with that. Speaking of sort of like guidance and things you learned along the way, I was kind of chuckling and thinking as I was reading about the Big Brothers Big Sisters and sort of the way they the rules they gave you in the beginning was kind of nebulous. You get this like 5-minute meeting and like boom.
No, it was I think it was 55-page book. It was pretty big. Yeah.
And then you met Rico and his family for a short period, and then, all right, you want to do this?
Go.
It's huge.
Take off. It's all yours. Yeah.
I was wondering, so it's a 55-page book. What extra? I mean, I keep, I'm on both sides. I'm reading and I'm going, wow, we're putting these mentors out there. We're the Big Brothers Big Sisters is encouraging this mentorship, and they give you this sort of this pamphlet, really. And growing up, I always heard my mom say, "There's no rule book for being a parent." But are there things that you would like to see or wish that would have been included in maybe a mentor rule book or parenting rule book that you learned along the way?
I feel like the reason that book exists, it exists for a very good reason, because you're talking about an organization that is setting up strangers with children. So you have to have some kind of rule book, right? But the nature of matching big brothers and big sisters with littles today is changing, and that is that we're working more towards educating the bigs on the child development stages and things that children need to learn at each of those stages. Because previously, as a mentor, you didn't really have that information. So if I wanted information on child development, if I was thinking this kid is 12 or 13 or 14, what's happening in his mind, if I couldn't remember from my own childhood and I had to look it up online, now we're looking at doing more of those kind of educational things and telling people the kinds of things that kids should be learning at each grade level outside the classroom, so you could help them with those types of things and experiences, and helping to build empathy in them for the poor, and getting them to volunteer somewhere, and so that they don't, because when you're a teenager you're always thinking about yourself, let's face it, or your hair, and if you're a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. And so getting them outside of thinking about themselves is, I think, really important. And there are a lot of other things like that. They don't teach personal finance in school anymore. You can talk to them about that. I mean, there's a whole list of things that you can teach children that, as a mentor, things that we know for ourselves today are really, we know them. And these are children who don't know them and won't know them unless somebody explains it to them. And I think that's where a mentor is really useful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would be a great learning experience for anyone contemplating being a parent to start having a mentor. Great lesson learning.
Or instead of.
There you go.
Instead of. Because the nice thing about being a mentor is that after you have them for a few hours, you get to take them home.
Drop them off. There you go, Mom. In fact, you've continued now. You've taken on Diego, which is Rico's little brother.
Yes.
He's 7 now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Are there any things that you're doing differently with Diego? And obviously, he's a different person, but
He's a little bit of a different person, yes. Having a really young child is very different than starting off with a preteen. But Diego, he's really smart, but he also needs a lot of educational assistance. He has an IEP, which I didn't know anything about. He's in a charter school now where he gets special attention, and I have no doubt that he will grow out of that. But I think, if I weren't in Diego's life, or if there weren't a mentor in Diego's life, then his life could very easily be very different. And that's why I think mentoring is so important.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a very powerful influence. And I mean, that's the thing I think that just keeps compelling me as I'm reading the book. Just keeps sort of pulling you along as the different ways that you're learning and sharing as you're going along the mentor process. You mentioned this spiritual vision that you had at one point in the book, and it's obviously this really powerful moment, this really important experience in your life. In sharp contrast to the Southern Baptist that you mentioned growing up, and this was a lot more of the sort of ecstatic sort of experience. How did religious pressure versus spiritual exploration or seeking help or hinder you in your life, and specifically as your role as a mentor?
Well, I think going all the way back to when I was a teenager, I had this very negative, I was getting a lot of negative feedback from the church about who I was, and that, I mean, every week I went to church, and the preacher would talk about how horrible gay people were and how we were all going to hell, and I sat through all that, but I just thought, I don't believe that. So somehow, and there's a lot of kids who couldn't take that week after week without injuring themselves, right? And we know there are a lot of teen suicides because people tell gay kids how awful they are. And somehow I was able to get through that time. And so I just never believed it. And I think the experience that I had, I think it's something that anyone could have at any time. I don't really fully understand it. I just want to say that it's all about unconditional love.
That's great. I just had one other one. As a parent, you know, we can't quit, even if we want to. We're like, these are our kids, we can't quit them. You gotta go through this sort of struggle at some points, and David's, you know, giving you permission that if you want to, you know, you could move on, you'd be fine. And at one point you even said, like, you kind of got
right
to the end of your
I
rope.
said, I quit. This is it. Bye. I'm done. Like, you are toast. Like, I cannot handle this anymore. Goodbye.
But you didn't stop there.
No, I couldn't.
You couldn't just,
because you know what?
Come out of here.
Then I'm guilty, right? Then I'm like another one of these people who's giving up. And I just couldn't do that.
What brought you to that place? And then you said you couldn't do it. So what kept you from actually quitting?
Saying goodbye. Having because of the way I did it, because I texted him like, oh, like, I can't stand you anymore, goodbye. And then I'm on a plane for 13 hours and I'm thinking, oh my God, like, he's hurting himself and he hates me and he's gonna, like, I'm gonna get off the plane and I'm gonna get a phone call that he's dead. And oh my God, I was just like, I can't do this, you know, I can't feel this guilty about it. So that's when I was like, I'm really sorry, I should never have said that. And I was in Germany and I'm texting him. And I just said, I can't be one of those people who gave up on him. I just can't do that. So I couldn't.
That's awesome. And I'm sure has he told you since then? Thank you for not giving up.
Oh yeah, sure.
Especially as he gets older and can
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think it's an amazing book. I think, you know, the relationship, seeing that unfold, it's just really heartwarming. Goes through all the emotions, laugh, cry, yell at the book.
Well, I want people to read it and think, well, there's a lot of things they could think, but I want them to feel like I should do something for the children in my own community. Because I just think about, you know, I read off earlier all the statistics about children in our community and the increase in gang violence and the increase in inability to graduate within 4 years. And I just think if as many of those children as we could help get through high school and get them on the road to having a good education and some kind of career, that our lives when we get old, think about myself when I'm older, I'm telling Rico, like, when I'm 85, I want you to be coming to visit me at the nursing home. So, you know, I'm helping you now because it's so, I think we owe it to the children of today, because we're thinking about our own future as well. Like, it is in our own best interest to take care of these children and make sure they're not all in jail and committing crimes, because that is not going to be pretty for all of us.
It's true. That's
Right?
why we have them to come help us later.
Yeah.
Well, I invite you all to definitely check out the book. I assume you're here because you have some interest. So we've only just touched the surface. There's so many stories in there, and really encourage you guys all to check it out. We're going to open it up to the book sales if you haven't gotten one yet or interested. Aaron, you're going to be doing some signing,
Yeah.
a little tap dance, a little soft shoe.
All of that. be doing all that.
Milling around, chatting. We got to finish off the wine, make sure it's all gone.
Yeah, we're not in any hurry to get out of here, so.
Cool.
Just hang out.
Thanks so much for chatting.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Jason.
putting this on.